Welcome, everybody, to our session on COVID recovery funding for Vermont cultural organizations. I'm Karen Middleman, Director of the Vermont Arts Council, and we're going to give it a couple minutes, I think, while participants are joining us, but a couple of housekeeping points before I introduce everybody today. This event is being recorded. It's also being live captioned, thanks to white coat captioning. If you'd like to view the captions during the event, just click on the closed captions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Then click on show subtitles and you'll be able to see the captions on your screen. You can also view a full page text of the captions by clicking on the link that my colleague Deirdre has just dropped into the chat. That will open all the captions in a separate full page browser for you to view. If you have questions about this or really any technical issues, feel free to drop a question in the chat and Deirdre or one of us will try to help you out. Similarly, if you have questions about any of the presentations, please post your questions in the chat. Please post questions in the chat and the speakers will address them at the end of each presentation. All right, I think we're ready to dig in. Again, I'm Karen Middleman from the Vermont Arts Council. We're Vermont's designated state arts agency, and we're also the state partner for the National Endowment for the Arts. Our mission is to build a Vermont where everyone across our state has access to the arts in their lives, their education, and their communities. Building that kind of healthy, vibrant ecosystem for Vermont takes way more than just one funder. We could not do our work without the critical partnership we have with our federal partners at the National Endowment for the Arts. It requires funders and policymakers at the local level and also a strong congressional delegation. Vermont is so fortunate, all of us are fortunate, to have Senator Leahy, Senator Sanders, and Representative Welch in our congressional delegation. As you all know, they are passionate advocates and supporters of the arts. And we are especially grateful to Senator Leahy for his passionate support and true leadership over the years, especially in this past year during the difficult year of the pandemic and with the passage of the American Rescue Plan Act. Senator Leahy couldn't join us today, but he sent a welcome video with some remarks that I'm happy to share with you.
I'm glad you joined us today for this important grants workshop. You know, what I hope is that when you leave this session, you're going to have a better understanding of how the National Endowment for the Arts is going to distribute the latest round of COVID relief funds. But I also hope that they'll work with you and show you how to write an even stronger application for that funding. First of all, I want to thank Karen Middleman and the crew at Vermont Arts Council for helping to organize this event. Think what we have here. Since the very start of the pandemic, the Arts Council has been such a critical player. You made sure that federal relief grants have reached those who have most needed the help. That was some exercise. So let's just stop for a minute to consider this. Since April 2020, the Vermont Arts Council has gone out with 5 times, that's the actual thing, 5 times the number of direct grants they would usually award in a year. 500% increase. They've also worked closely with Vermont Humanities. They've worked to make sure these federal relief dollars reach nearly 200 cultural organizations and more than 400 artists in our special state of Vermont. Now, we know that for many, this funding was a lifeline, but the Arts Council stepped up and answered the call. And that required a tremendous amount of work and staff time. And for that, all of us in Vermont owe the Arts Council a great debt of gratitude. But I also want to thank the NEA for offering to hold this workshop and doing it in Vermont. Today, the National Endowment of Arts will help you navigate the complexities of the latest round of federal relief grants, and they do get kind of complex. So I want to specifically give a nod to Ben Kessler at the NEA. Ben has been really great about connecting with my office to better understand the needs of Vermont's creative economy. And by creative economy, I mean all of you at this meeting. Now, as chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, I've worked to make sure that funding for the arts and humanities was included in our COVID relief bills. I made sure it was in there. We put as much as we could. I like even more. You know, throughout my years in Washington, I fought to increase funding for the NEA and the NEH, because we've had some presidents in the past who've tried to eliminate these vital agencies. Well, the president now will not, but also know that I'm going to continue to be your strongest supporter. But the real work lies in getting the money to you, the artists, the musicians, actors, sound technicians, everyone else involved in our creative sector. Many of you I see when I'm home on weekends in Vermont. And that's why we're here today. So thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing some of your great work when I'm back in Vermont this summer. Whenever you see Marcel and myself on the street or at the grocery store or farmer's market, come by and say hi. Thank you.
Our thanks again to Senator Leahy and his office. In the coming year, as our cultural organizations recover from the impact of the pandemic, our partnership with our colleagues at the National Endowment for the Arts is going to be more critical than ever. So I'm especially delighted that we have 3 members of the NEA staff with us today. I'm happy to introduce Ben Kessler, Director of Congressional Affairs, Andy Mathis, a specialist in state and regional partnerships, and Eleanor Billington, Grants Management Specialist. They're going to share information about new federal grants available through the American Rescue Plan Act. Take it away, Ben.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. And of course, to Senator Leahy's office, as Karen so eloquently said, there's no greater delegation, champions just for the arts and the creative economy, as the senator said. And it's not just that they support the arts, but they get the arts and what it means to our communities, to our economy. And we're so grateful to Karen, to Amy, and to Deirdre for having us today. We look forward to being with you in person sometime soon, but we want to make sure that we're able to connect virtually and that you're in a position to succeed as you tackle a ARP grant with us. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hoping that all looks okay on everyone's end. And well, I just want to start by saying that the goal for today is not only to provide a deep dive into the upcoming American Rescue Plan funding opportunity, but really to demystify, and really the senator said it well, the National Endowment for the Arts and our application process. We want you to leave this meeting knowing that the NEA grant is within your reach and that you have the technical assistance tools that you need to succeed. And that means staying in touch with us. This is an ongoing conversation. If you've never applied for federal funding before, this is the beginning of that conversation. We want you to stay in touch. And one way that you can do that, and we'll provide lots of different ways to contact us, but there's also an ongoing Q&A session, live Q&A session. It'll look a lot like the Zoom room that we're in today, and you'll be greeted by a couple friendly faces from the NEA. Just open office hours, think of an academic setting when you went and saw a professor or something like that. And they'll just take any questions you have, listen in if there's nothing on your mind. No question too small. Chances are that if you're thinking it, someone else is too. So we hope that's an opportunity to continue to learn, go to one, go to all of them, and hope to see you in some of those. And the presentation will provide a general overview of the NEA, the grant programs we offer, and then get into more of the details about the upcoming opportunity made possible with the senator's leadership and the American Rescue Plan. And then we'll make sure we have plenty of questions and allow our friends from Vermont to get into a little bit of the details about the opportunities that they have available for your application as well. So a little bit on how we got here, if that's okay. In addition to our regular annual grant programs and as part of the American Rescue Plan, the National Endowment for the Arts will distribute $135 million. And of that amount, 40% has been allocated to the state and regional arts organizations for regranting through their programs. And you'll hear more about the opportunities that Karen and Amy will make available to you all. And what we'll underscore throughout the presentation is please apply broadly. Apply with us at the NEA, NEFA at the regional level, and at the state level as well. And if you've, and we'll touch on this throughout the presentation, if you've received other federal funding, especially when we think about the Shuttered Venue Program or PPP loans, that does not preclude you from applying to us. Apply broadly. We understand the need in the field is tremendous, and we want you to be able to come out of this pandemic as close to whole as possible. So we'll distribute, so we mentioned the 40%, we'll distribute the remaining 60% to arts organizations and local arts agencies, and that's what we'll dive into today. And funding will be available for general operating support, and we'll talk about exactly what that means. And guidelines are available on our website right now. Want to make sure that if you haven't had a chance to look, please do get started. That first step deadline is August 12th. And we know that, depending on your mindset, a month feels like a long time, maybe not if you're thinking in a different way. No matter what, get started. There are some technical hiccups that can happen along the way. We want to make sure that you're not precluded from applying just because of some small issue that came up on the website or something like that. And right now we're making sure that the funding reaches a broad constituency, including organizations that serve populations traditionally underserved by government. And that can mean organizations with small and medium-sized budgets, organizations from rural to urban communities, and organizations that may be applying for federal support through the Arts Endowment for the first time. And we know that if you are applying for the first time, it's an intimidating process. Even if you're a seasoned grant writer, every time you do this, there's some intimidation factor. It's a cumbersome process. We get that. We'll just continue to emphasize the importance of staying in touch. We want to provide the technical resources that you need, again, so you're in a position to succeed when you hit that submit button on your application. And we'll talk more about the specifics of the ARP program and its support for operating costs near the end of our presentation. Our regular annual grant programs provide project support, and we'll walk through the details on our annual programs now, just to make sure that you're staying engaged beyond that August 12th deadline and when we move forward on that step 2 of the ARP application process. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleagues, Andy and Eleanor.
Thank you, Ben. We're going to provide a brief overview of NEA funding opportunities before we specifically focus on the ARP grants, as Ben has said. And for those of you new to engaging with us, we want you to understand about all of the different types of support you might be eligible to request in addition to the ARP funds. As Ben noted, generally our funding supports arts projects. When we get to the ARP section of this presentation, you'll see that those grants support operating costs, and that's reflected in the asterisk you see in the right-hand column on the screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the types of organizations that are eligible to apply for NEA funding. Eligibility is open to tax-exempt organizations, including 501c3 nonprofits, units of state or local government, including local arts agencies and educational institutions, and federally recognized tribal communities or tribes. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see examples of things that we're not able to fund. Usually general operating support, except for the ARP support and certain waivers that I'll get to in a minute. Individual artists, commercial activities, and fiscal sponsors. The full list of items that we do not fund is published in our guidelines posted on our website, www.arts.gov. And I want to clarify that asterisk on general operating support. We do have new legislation related to allowing previously awarded project grants to be used for general operating support in response to COVID-19. If you have a previously funded award, you may be able to transition that into general operating support. Work with our grants office on that. However, currently all upcoming FY22 grant applications will continue to be for project-based support only. And then, as we've been mentioning, the ARP support, the only allowable expenses are operating support. There are certain requirements you must meet in order to be eligible to apply for an NEA grant. You've got to be a 501c3 nonprofit at the time of application. You must have a 3-year history of arts programming, and you must be in compliance with reporting requirements for previous NEA awards. For our regular grant programs, you must provide a one-to-one cost share or match of non-federal funds, and the match can be achieved in a variety of ways, including earned income through ticket sales or in-kind donations of space. And the match can also be a combination of these or others. The ARP funds, though, are totally non-matching. There is no match required for the ARP funds. Our grant review process includes 3 levels of review. The first level is a citizen panel, which is made up of experts from the field, whether they're paid professionals or not. And all of our panels are diverse in terms of geography, gender, ethnicity, and expertise. Panel recommendations are then submitted to the National Council on the Arts for its review and approval. And then the NEA chairman provides the final review and approval. If you're interested in being part of this process, we're always looking for new panelists, and we'll talk a bit more later about how to volunteer to serve at the very end of the presentation. And one other comment on our process. Panel feedback is always available to applicants. If you apply and you're not recommended for a grant, we encourage you to reach out to your staff contact. It can be really helpful to hear what parts of an application resonated with panelists and what things they might have had questions or concerns about. Now I'll turn it over to Eleanor.
Okay, thanks, Andy. There are 3 different funding categories offered by the NEA. Partnership agreements are only available to the designated state arts agencies and 6 U.S. regional arts organizations, including the Vermont Arts Council, our host for this webinar. The NEA has several funding opportunities for organizations. They include grants for arts projects, Challenge America, Our Town, and research grants. These are the largest grants we offer, and nonprofit organizations receive the bulk of our direct funding. Grants for individuals are limited to literature fellowships. In addition, we have 2 honorific programs that offer recognition to jazz artists through the NEA's Jazz Masters program, and folk and traditional artists through our National Heritage Fellowship program. Generally, you can submit 1 application per year per organization. However, there are some exceptions to this rule, so make sure to check the guidelines for clarity. By law, 40% of the NEA's grant funds are designated for the states and regions. The funding is awarded through partnership agreement grants to the 50 state government arts agencies, 6 territories, and 6 regional arts organizations. Through partnership agreement support, the Arts Endowment makes the arts available in many more communities than it could through just our direct grant programs. The color coding on this map aligns each state with its regional arts organization. And as you can see, we have Vermont included as a part of the New England Foundation for the Arts, NEFA, and that's represented in pale yellow up on the right-hand side of your screen. We mentioned 3 of our primary funding programs for arts organizations, and those are Challenge America, Grants for Arts Projects, and Our Town. Next, we'll focus on the details about each program. Andy?
Thank you, Eleanor. For Challenge America, that program primarily supports small organizations to extend the reach of the arts to populations that are considered underserved. All grantees must address how their organization or audience has been underserved, and this is defined by our legislation and by agency policy, and refers to those whose opportunities to experience the arts are limited by geography, ethnicity, economics, or disability. All awards in Challenge America are $10,000 and require a 1-to-1 match. And Challenge America includes an abbreviated application and robust technical assistance resources. The deadline is typically in April of each year. Our Town program provides support for creative placemaking projects. So what do we mean by creative placemaking? The most simple definition is about strengthening local communities through the arts and culture. Creative placemaking is when arts, culture, and design activities are deliberately integrated into efforts that strengthen communities. Now let's look at the NEA's largest funding category, grants for arts projects. Applications are submitted to one of 15 discipline programs at either the February or July deadline each year. Funding is available for all stages of the artistic process, and that can include creation, presentation and exhibition, arts education and enrichment, as well as services to the field, such as conferences and professional development. All grants require at least a one-to-one match, and awards can range from $10,000 to $100,000, and the project timeline can be for up to 2 years. In grants for arts projects, we support projects across 15 different arts disciplines. You'll see these listed on the screen here, and guidelines for each discipline are posted on our website. To apply, you would choose the appropriate discipline based on the content of your project, not your organization, the content of your project, and follow the guidelines and application instructions for that discipline. We encourage you to look through the discipline-specific guidelines and reach out to the staff with any questions. And contact information for our full staff, including each artistic discipline, is available on our website. Eleanor?
Thank you, Andy. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan opportunity. Please note that we actually have 2 ARP grant programs, each with its own deadline and requirements. The July 22nd deadline is for local arts agencies that wish to run a sub-granting program. The August 12th deadline is for all other organizations seeking operational support, including local arts agencies that do not wish to run a sub-granting program. Each program has its own award amount and timeline, specific eligibility requirements, documentation, and reporting requirements. As you can see on the slide, support is designated for very specific costs: salary support, fees and stipends for artists and contractual personnel, facilities costs, costs associated with health and safety supplies like PPE, and marketing and promotion costs. These are a few of the most common questions we've been receiving. So yes, you can apply for ARP funds even if you've received and applied for other NEA CARES Act funds, any other NEA grant, or other federal relief funds, just like the ones Ben mentioned, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant or the PPP Paycheck Protection Program. So please apply broadly. And if you have a question about something that we haven't mentioned, contact us just to make sure, but it's probably okay. Work samples are not required for ARP applications. And we also get this question a lot. So what is the difference between a project-based grant and general operating grant? In a project-based grant, all of the costs have to relate to the execution of a specific project. So that may be a particular publication or a festival. In an operations-based grant, eligible costs are not tied to a specific project, so they're more general. It doesn't mean that you can't have salary covered in an operations grant for a staff who's working on particular projects or a particular area of programming. It just means that the majority of the costs that we're able to support have to be connected to your core work, your day-to-day work. And a lot of questions come up around that. And so please, later when we're answering questions, you can put them in the chat box, but we're willing to talk more about what that means, the difference between the project-based grant and what ARP is, these operation-based grants. Andy?
Thanks, Eleanor. So get started now to register with sam.gov and grants.gov if you haven't already. You need those in place in order to submit an application to us, and the process can take some time, and we want you to have that all ready to go. Late applications are not accepted, and actually we encourage you to try to submit early, so if there are any tech issues, we can clear them up well before the deadline. We have special ARP mailboxes where you can submit questions as you're going along, and designated ARP telephone numbers too, and also the Zoom office hours that Ben was talking about earlier. And there's a wealth of technical assistance resources on our website. Whichever program you do decide to apply for, the process is the same. It's a 2-part application process. Part 1 is where you'll work with the 2 federal systems, sam.gov, which is the system for awards management, and grants.gov. You're going to need those up-to-date registrations and the correct permissions in order to apply for funding. Once you have current accounts in both systems, the actual form you submit for Part 1 is called the SF 424 form. Very government. SF stands for standard form, SF 424. This form provides basic information about your organization and shouldn't take too long to fill out. You aren't required to submit any information with specific details about your project at this point. Think of this step as submitting your intent to apply. It's a way to express your interest in submitting the full application in part 2. Eleanor?
Okay, part 2. This is the actual Arts Endowments grant application form. This is where you will submit the bulk of your application and all of the specifics about your project or a request for general operating support for ARP. You'll put together your narrative, including details on your organization's history, your proposal description, and your budget. The grant application form is submitted through our Arts Endowment online platform, which is called the Applicant Portal. The guidelines for each of our funding programs, which are all posted on our website, arts.gov, include step-by-step instructions on using the applicant portal and how to apply. The instructions for part 2 include a PDF document. This document goes through all the questions you'll need to answer, including helpful tips, screenshots of the applicant portal, and the character count for each application field. All of the information is already online now at arts.gov, so you can go ahead and compile all of the application content ahead of the part 2 deadline. And we recommend you start that process now. You'll enter all of that information into the NEA's applicant portal during the designated time frame. We would love to stay connected with you through our newsletters. We release regular newsletters that highlight upcoming grant program deadlines, as well as events and resources. It is a wonderful way to keep up with what's going on at the Arts Endowment and specific field news from around the country. So please subscribe. It's easy to do. You can go to the website at arts.gov, and at the bottom of the homepage is a button for newsletters. You can click there and sign up for any newsletter topics that most interest you. One last reminder, Andy mentioned this earlier, but we are always looking for new voices to bring into our panel process. We learn so much from the panelists that we work with, and it's a great way for those panelists to connect with us and learn about the process from the other side. We've also been told by many people that it's a great professional development opportunity. So if you're interested, you can fill out a form on our website. There's a URL listed there, or you can contact us directly. Okay, thank you. I think we're going to move into Q&A now. Ben?
Thank you so much, Eleanor and Andy. We recognize that that's a lot of information all at once. So we want to give you time to formulate your questions. Again, as Karen said, if you could direct those into the chat, and we'll be glad to move through those. I see we have one question already. The question is, can you please define arts programming and how we would document that we have 3 years of history implementing arts programming? Andy or Eleanor? Eleanor, do you have quick thoughts there?
Yes, so we have a broad definition of arts programming. We have seen all sorts of things from different organizations. So if you're not solely an arts focused organization, we hope that you are considering applying. And the way that you would show us that arts programming history is if you have one arts event for the last 3 years that was related to perhaps a teaching artist coming into your facility or to your history museum and talking about some of the work that's on view at the museum, or if you have programming that goes out into the community where you're inviting individuals in to work through a program that involves art therapy or any number of things. So we have a really broad definition of arts programming, and we just need that one instance per the past 3 years, and the previous 3 years don't need to be consecutive. We also know with COVID that for a lot of people there's been an interruption in your programming, and we certainly understand that. And the way that you would show us that is through our the part 2 application. So there are specific instructions about this at arts.gov and our guidelines, but we'll just ask you for a little bit of information about this session, maybe the artists that were brought in. We'll ask you what the audience for that event was, just so we can make sure that you do have a history of arts programming. But we have a very broad definition, and if you want to ask us, feel free to check with the staff first if you're concerned. You know, we have people who primarily do science programming come to us and say, we have an exhibit on the, maritime cultural history and the art of boat making. Would that be considered arts programming if we brought in schools to work with teaching artists around the craft of making boats? And that's a really good example. That would be arts programming. So things like that are certainly considered arts programming. If you have any questions about it, please let us know. I'll go ahead and drop those emails for our designated ARP email and phone lines into the chat, just so everybody has them.
Great. Thank you so much, Eleanor. The question comes in, we are a very small organization and trying to determine if we have the administrative capacity to apply for, administer, and report on this grant. Can you please try and quantify how much work and time going to applying for and receiving a grant from the NEA? I think we would love to try. I don't know if we have specific thoughts on if we could quantify it. I think we appreciate, Rachel, that you lifting that up, as we're mindful of the fact that it is a real decision, especially if you're a small organization, that it takes significant resources just to apply. And I just want to emphasize that we want to make sure that there's a return on investment for you, even if you don't eventually receive an NEA grant. And I know that it's small consolation, but we want to make sure that we're forming those relationships with you. You've met us, perhaps you'll meet some other colleagues of ours. As you ask some questions, you go to the live Q&A chats. I know it's not the same as receiving a $50,000 grant. We want to make sure that you stay engaged, that you perhaps apply next year for our regular grants for arts projects program. But I don't know, Eleanor or Andy, if you have thoughts, just as you've worked with so many of our applicants, about trying to quantify the time.
I can speak a little bit to time commitment, and it is a significant time commitment. I think Ben's right. We want to be very upfront with people that it does require a fair amount of work to manage a federal grant. We have reporting requirements if you do receive funding, and there's paperwork when you request payments. I will also say that there's a lot of support for these steps in the process, and especially with ARP, we're trying to be very accessible in terms of technical assistance for people who are applying. Andy mentioned the applicant resources section on our website at arts.gov, and there is a wealth of information there, but it can also be really overwhelming. The guidelines are extremely descriptive and helpful, but they can also be overwhelming because they are lengthy. So we're aware of that, and we want you to reach out to us. And if you just want to talk it through over the phone even, or via email, and say, here's what we're thinking, what's your feedback? Here's the amount of time that maybe we have as an organization to dedicate to this. How does that match up with what you've heard from other people who've gone through this process? And certainly the first time you do it, it does take a little bit longer because you're learning as you go. And we know that, and we want to support you through that process too. So we also have a whole section on the website that just says first time applicants, and I can submit that link in the chat too, just throw it in there so you guys can see what's there. And it's helpful information about just some of those first steps, registering with sam.gov and grants.gov, making sure you have a DUNS number and those sorts of things. So I hope, like Ben said, I don't have a certain amount of hours that it would take or what it looks like on managing the back end and reporting requirements, but we are very open to speaking with you and also to looking at other options if you decide the NEA is not the place for you to be. Just right now, we can talk about other things, regional options, going through your state arts agency.
And I would also encourage you to visit one of our open Zoom office hours and talk about that with the NEA staff who are there moderating the session and with the other folks who are considering applying. It's a great way to start a conversation on an issue that is important to you. And these are free-flowing conversations, and we try to respond to everyone's priorities in there. So we don't necessarily have a special agenda. We are there to respond to your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Eleanor. And Andy, we have a couple of questions coming in about trying to differentiate the part one versus part two. I think, Andy, you said it well, that part one is really your intent to apply with us, that you're tackling some steps required for federal funding, whether it's with the NEA, whether it's the Department of Labor, whether it's any federal funds. This is information that you will need to upload. So a helpful step, regardless of if you're applying with us, but you might be applying for federal funding down the road, this is a useful step for you to take. And if you have additional clarifying thoughts there.
Yeah, grants.gov is federal government wide, so that part one lets you go. What I say, grants.gov is the federal government's front door for anybody seeking a grant. from the federal government. So you need to go through that process to register with the federal government to say, hi, I'm here from Vermont. I'm looking for some NEA ARP funding. Let me in. And so once you get through there, then you're going to come to the NEA site, which for part 2, which is called the applicant portal. And that's where you'll be telling us about your project. So that first step through grants.gov with the standard form 424, that's where you just give us name, rank, serial number, your name, your address, organization, how much you're applying for, very, very basic information that gets input into a database. Part 2 is where you get to be far more descriptive. You talk about your project, its impact on your organization, its impact on your community, what the funding will allow you to do, why you're requesting the funding, and that's where the personality and the lifeblood of your project comes through. I shouldn't say project because this is operational support. The lifeblood of your request comes through.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andy. A question about programmatic history. I just want to emphasize that the eligibility requirements for this ARP opportunity is almost entirely the same as when you're applying for a regular grant. The big difference, as Andy just mentioned, is the big asterisk that we had on the slide at the beginning is operating support versus programmatic support. ARP is for operating support. A question, we are working on our nonprofit status and are at the last step. We have all the other steps done, but we are worried that IRS delays due to COVID may not have us approved by the NEA grant deadline. Is there any way to show up this in the process and still be eligible to apply? I fear that the answer is that you have to have that federally registered 501c3 done. I see sad reactions from my colleagues as well. We understand, everything that you're going through. I think, given your circumstances, just make sure that you're in touch. The deadlines for Vermont, for NEFA might be different. Stay in touch. If you miss us by a little bit, please stay engaged with us during our regular grant making process. We understand that news is disappointing. It's just something in our guidelines, and in order to meet the congressional intent and be as efficient as possible in getting the money out the door, we have to require that folks have that federally registered 501c3 at the time of application. Is there assistance for registering your entity on sam.gov? The website is a bit confusing. We certainly hear that, or perhaps it is currently experiencing technical issues. Also could be true, and some individual assistance would be appreciated. So we have, and we can put it in the chat, a page that we hope will be helpful to folks applying for federal funding for the first time and gets a little into the weeds on SAM and grants.gov. So as Andy mentioned, that those websites are not run by the NEA. So those are federal government wide, and they have their own customer support lines. So we'd strongly encourage you to check out that page on our website and also reach out to them. We know it's a cumbersome process. We know about the technical hiccups. I think that's the one thing we'd continue to stress is, figure out what's wrong with the website now, as opposed to at 11:58 on August 12th, right before the deadline. So glad that you're checking that out. We know it can be difficult. And we want to make sure that you have the technical assistance resources you need.
And the folks at the help desk at sam.gov and grants.gov are great. They are wonderful. They can get into the back end of things which we cannot do, and they're so helpful to people. So please do take advantage of them.
And they're available 24/7. They're very available. So except for federal holidays, they are there for you 24/7.
Great. And we have a question, and I think it's so important, about whether there's different criteria for the $50,000 award, the $100,000 award, the $150,000 award. And we know that that's front of mind for you. And I just want to emphasize at the start that no part of the application, and certainly not this question, is meant as a gotcha question to trip you up. There should be no thought process in the back of your mind, but I can understand it completely. Am I asking for too much? Am I being greedy? My neighbor needs more. Should I ask for 50 when I really need $100,000? The answer is that a lot of this will be up to you, your budget, and your work. Take a look at our guidelines, see how that fits in. We just, and this is another instance, stay in touch, and we want to make sure that this works for you. We don't have a clear one size fits all, you should definitely apply for 50, you should definitely apply for 100, et cetera. But we just want to emphasize this is completely designed with flexibility in mind. If you have experience applying a year ago or more with CARES, the CARES Act, that was set at a flat level of $50,000. We wanted to get a little more flexible this time around, make sure we're serving organizations with budgets of all sizes. Your response might be, well, $50,000 is too much for my organization. I want to stress that you can apply these funds over the course of 2 years. And also still, if that doesn't work for you, want to make sure that you're considering those other funding options. We'll get into our colleagues from Vermont about the different funding levels that are available. But Andy or Eleanor, any additional thoughts? Because I think that question is so front of mind for people.
Yeah, there are 2 review criteria, and they pertain to the artistic excellence of the request and artistic merit. And that does not change no matter which funding level you request. So it's the same all the way through.
Great, thank you. So a question about whether ARP funding can apply for new positions, or does general operating costs only apply to existing positions? So as Andy nodded on the former, I think we can safely say new positions. And I think, again, what's so important and so exciting about the ARP opportunity is that it's really meant to staff back up, to be able to reopen your doors, to come on the other side of this pandemic as whole as possible. So the fact that you're thinking about staffing, going from part-time to full-time positions, bringing back furloughed employees, all of those things could be part of general operating support. Questions coming in as well. Do we have to write a proposal for what kind of operating support we would like to receive? So I think the answer there is, yeah, I'm not sure if, I think the answer is yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
because you're going to have to submit what's called a project budget, but it's, in this case, it's your operating support budget. We'll just call it your ARP budget. And our budget forms have sections that list personnel costs and other direct expenses. So you're going to have to identify where those costs are going. And in the application narrative, you're going to want to tell a compelling story about why you're requesting those funds and the impact that they will have, as I mentioned, on your organization, on your community. So it will be important to lay the groundwork so that the panelists understand you and your organization and your place in your community. So I think, yes, you're going to have to specify exactly where you want to be directing those funds so that you can tell the story about it.
There are not we've had a lot of questions about, are there specific questions for the narrative that we can go ahead and prep? And it is, Andy's exactly right. It's different than a project request because it's a little bit of a different format, but we still want specifics. We want specific information. So if you're requesting money for a particular position, like Andy said, tell your story, but also describe the impact on the organization. You know, what would happen if this position was eliminated, or what happened when it was furloughed, or if you're asking for a new position, you know, what impact is that going to have on your community? We also have a section where you can talk about audience participation in community. It gives you the chance to say, you know, here's our demographic, here's who we're serving. And it also gives you a chance to talk about how COVID impacted your community. And if it's appropriate, you know, to talk about that in relationship to your budget request. So I think you want all of those things to line up for the panelists to see the description and the proposal, and then the budget, and then your organization and its history, all those pieces to sort of fit together, even if it maybe isn't as compelling in terms of subject matter because it's operational support. You still have the chance to give us a story and make the narrative compelling for your panelists.
Great. Thank you. And we'll just spend a couple more minutes on Q&A for us at the NEA. I want to make sure Amy has time to go over the funding opportunities with the state as well. But just to follow up on that point, a question about, will ARP grant proposals be funded all or nothing, or will partial grants be awarded? So we're only able to fund at the level for which you apply. And that's what we understand makes this question even more important. And if you didn't realize that already, that means you're stressing out over which funding level to apply even more. And we would just, again, encourage you, stay in touch, take a look at our guidelines, see what makes sense for your budget, drop by the live Q&A, send emails. We want to make sure that this is helpful for you. The different funding levels, again, are not meant to trip you up, and we just want to make sure that we're able to fund organizations of all sizes. And just a question about, I believe that the ARP grant is a reimbursement-based grant. Does that mean we have to submit, let's say, monthly receipts and documentation in order to receive the funding? Talk a little bit about the technical side of what happens once awarded a grant.
I can do that. Receiving your funding for the ARP grant is no different than receiving your funding for any other NEA grant. We're not going to send you a check in the mail. It's up to you to request the funding from us, and you can either request an advance, and if you're doing that, you may only request the amount that you'll be able to get out the door within 30 days of the date of your request, or you may request a reimbursement for funds you've already expended. In that case, you can request any amount that you need since you've already spent the funds yourselves.
Great, thank you so much, Andy. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Amy. I'm going to put back in that there was a question in the chat about that website that help with SAM and grants.gov. I'm going to put that link in the chat right now. And thanks to everyone. And you know, if you do think of questions, again, live Q&A, please stay in touch.
Thank you all so much. And before Amy starts, I just want to put a plug in for the live Q&A sessions. I have heard from so many people how valuable they are. And I can attest from personal experiences that the NEA staff is wonderful to work with and ready to help you. So I can't stress enough, reach out with your questions and call them directly and go to those live Q&As. So thank you all so much, Ben, Eleanor, Andy. It's wonderful to have you with us in Vermont. And next, I'm going to turn things over to Amy Cunningham, Deputy Director at the Arts Council, who's going to talk to you about some of our funding opportunities.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ben, Andy, and Eleanor. That was really helpful, and I'm very excited for lots of competitive applications from Vermont coming your way. So I want to share some highlight information about the Vermont grant program that is parallel, complementary to these NEA direct grants that you've just learned about. So the NEA distributed ARP money to every state arts agency in the country for us to redistribute to the field. Similarly, the National Endowment for the Humanities distributed funding to every state humanities council to redistribute to the field. We are partnering with our friends at Vermont Humanities to run one grant program to distribute both pots of those dollars out to the field, to the arts and cultural and humanities field. So I'm going to share my screen here and just go over some highlights. There's 4 key takeaways I want you to hear. I know we're throwing a ton of information out at you right now, but for this grant, you can apply for and receive both of these grants. So our state cultural recovery grant, you can also apply for and receive the NEA grant. Any other, as Andy mentioned, any other federal assistance or the state assistance that you've received in the last year for COVID relief, none of that prevents you from applying for these funds. So I want to be sure that folks are clear on that. Secondly, I want to let you know that Catherine Sims is our grant coordinator for this grant program. And she is available every Monday and Wednesday for 30-minute phone or Zoom calls. You can email her directly. In addition, she did a complete webinar about this grant program in its entirety, and it's available on our website. And this is what the webpage looks like for this grant program on our website. It looks a little different right now because underneath those paragraphs, the webinar video link is there. But you'll see on the right, you can email Catherine directly. You can sign up for a one-on-one consultation. And importantly, there's the complete grant guidelines and FAQs there. So again, I just have time to hit some of the highlights, but I really encourage you to talk to Catherine and dig in deeper on those guidelines and FAQs. Another thing I'd like to emphasize is that We also have an online grant portal. It is a little more straightforward than SAM.gov and grants.gov, but it is new. So many of you who are accustomed to applying to us through our old GoSmart system or Slide Room, we have a new program. And so I would encourage you, like Andy was saying, for their grants, go ahead and get in the system. So go ahead and register, and you'll see on this page where it says on the right side where there's information about the grant contact, there's also a link there to apply online, and it'll lead you to registration for that portal. So I encourage you to do that early. Our grant awards there's 3 different grant awards, and these, for ours, you don't get to decide. It's based on your operating expenses from FY19. The before times is how we're kind of judging. We know that everybody's FY20 was a little bit up in the air. So the grant awards are $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000. And there is no match required for this grant program. Key dates, we have 2 rounds, July 21st by 5 p.m. and September 14th by 5 p.m. We encourage, if you are able, we encourage you to apply in that first round, and then you get 2 bites at the apple. If you're not funded in that first round, you will automatically be considered in the second round. We created these 2 deadlines for 2 reasons. One, we're aware that summertime in Vermont is especially a high intensity time for our arts organizations. So we wanted to give folks a little bit more time if they needed it. And secondly, it just allows us to do a little bit more outreach, because we are really hopeful to have new applicants coming our way, and to be able to provide assistance for organizations who aren't typically able to apply for this kind of funding. The activity, our notifications are within 2 to 4 weeks of submission. The activities, the grant period is December 1st, 2021 to November 30th, 2022. And we'll have a final report that we'll ask you to complete November 30th, 2022. I'll also mention that this is a grant program that is in collaboration with Vermont Humanities. And so we're administering this grant as one application. You'll receive funding either from the Vermont Arts Council or from Vermont Humanities. And for some of your organizations that kind of cross the line and are both arts and humanities, you may receive a check from each of us. In that case, you'll have separate grant contracts. So general operating support. So this is for the day-to-day business expenses. It includes any or all of the following for arts funding: staff salary support, fees, stipends for artists, facilities costs such as rent and utilities, costs associated with health and safety supplies for staff and or visitors, audiences, and marketing and promotion costs. I think that mirrors pretty closely what the NEA direct grants are. So the NEA and the NEH have slightly different definitions for what they see as general operating grants. And so this is how we're defining general operating for the arts. And again, many of you are familiar with grant programs that require you to craft a spiffy narrative for a new shiny project. And this is about funding your day-to-day. And so I would encourage you to use this grant to pay for the boring things that other grants won't pay for. So this is rent, utilities, staff costs, many of those things that other grants and funders aren't interested or able to fund. So again, I won't go through all of this specifically because I think we do primarily have arts organizations here, but there are specific definitions around what general operating costs are for the humanities-based grants. They are similar, but there are some nuances that you'll want to check in on. The funds cannot be used for overlapping project costs. We've talked about, Andy mentioned that. Funds for activities supported by other non-NEH, non-NEA federal funds. You can't re-grant this money. You are not allowed to use it for costs that date before March 15th, 2021. And then the typical federal restrictions around travel, promotion of political, religious, or ideological point of views, support of specific public policies or legislation, and lobbying. So eligibility, this grant program is for arts and or humanities organizations with 501c3 tax exempt status. We are not able in this grant program, unfortunately, to allow fiscal agents. So organizations without 501c3 may not apply through a fiscal agent for this particular grant. We do have some other grants where we're able to allow that. This program is open to arts and or humanities organizations that operate under the umbrella of a college or university with 501c3 status. So an example of that would be an art museum that's on a college campus. And nonprofit organizations that offer humanities programming, but are not strictly cultural organizations, may also be eligible for project support. So there is a side kind of angle there for some project funding that is humanities based, that NEH is allowing that. Our public libraries, and for this grant program, our public libraries may apply for that angle I was just talking about, for humanities-based program funds only, simply because we are aware that our friends at the Vermont Department of Libraries are able to issue direct operating grants to each of our public libraries. So that's the reasoning for that. Again, if you've received other recovery funds, you are eligible for this. And this does not prevent you from applying to any of our other Arts Council or Humanities Council grants, our regular grants, humanities project grants, arts partner grants, cultural facilities grants. You're still eligible for all of that. And again, here's that website page, just drawing your attention to that. That's where you'll find all of the most in-depth information in it. And I encourage you to reach out to Catherine Sims directly for more information on the grant. And here, as I mentioned, that online grant portal. We have a new and different online grant system. So you'll click that apply online, and it will lead you to a quick registration project and process. And we will approve that registration within a day or two, but you want to go ahead and get that out of the way. And again, here's Catherine's information. She is willing and ready and to spend as much time as you need answering questions and talking through the process. We want to make this as simple as possible. And let's see, so from there, I'm going to stop sharing. And now I can see the chat is all filled up. So let's see here. I am, yes, literary arts counts. Here's the cultural, Deirdre has provided the link for the grants.
Amy, I can throw you out a couple questions that have come in. One of them is, when you say we can't re-grant these funds, can we use it to pay performers?
That's not a re-grant. That's paying them for work. That's a payment for services. So that's completely fine. And let's see.
And one more in the Q&A. Since this is for general operating support, what would be the reasons for not being funded?
So the criteria for funding for this grant has to do with evidence of financial hardship that because of COVID. We are also looking at, and there, I should say, there's the specific criteria are outlined in the guidelines, but we're also looking at evidence of quality of programming, artistic merit, and excellence. And we are especially encouraging of organizations that are led by or center traditionally under-resourced communities in our state. So those are the kind of key criteria that we're looking at for these decisions. And I should say we will have, these decisions will be made by an external, there's a pool of 4 external panelists and Arts Council and Humanities Council staff together in deliberation.
Just on that question about why an organization might not be funded at the NEA level, as Andy mentioned, our criteria as set by Congress in our authorizing statute is artistic merit and artistic excellence. So again, I think Andy and Eleanor said it well about tying it back to your narrative about what this money will mean for your community, for your arts programming. Even though it's general operating support, it still goes back to your overall organizational mission.
Great, thank you, Ben. Any other questions about cultural recovery? I'm not seeing any in my chat. Karen, are you? Look at that. We have 1 minute to spare. Karen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. 1 minute to spare. Thank you, Amy. So that was terrific. And I think I will say thank you to all and to our NEA colleagues one more time for joining us. I wish you all well, and I hope you all have wonderful arts experiences this summer as our arts organizations open back up again. And Amy and I look forward to seeing many of you in Vermont as we travel around the state this summer. So to all of you, good night, good afternoon. It's been great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.